تبارك الذي جعل في السماء بروجا وجعل فيها سراجا وقمرا منيرا. For the benefit of those who do not understand my native language, our khutbah for today is leading with justice, the Islamic paradigm of leadership. My dear brothers and sisters in Islam, today we gather to reflect on a crucial aspect of our faith, that is leadership in Islam. In Islam, leadership is not merely a position of power, but a sacred trust and a moral responsibility. Leadership is a trust from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But the most important thing is that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts you in the position of leadership, you should always remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is the most important thing. But one thing you should also know is that every position of leadership you find yourself is a trust, is a test from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us what amana is in Surah Al-Ahzab chapter 33 verse 72. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, إنا عرضنا الأمانة على السماوات والأرض والجبال فأبين أن يحملنها وأشفقنا منها وحملها الإنسان إنه كان ظلوما جهولا. In this noble verse of the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, Inna aradna al-amanata ala al-samawati wal-ardi wal-jibal. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, indeed, we offered the trust to the heavens and the earth and the mountains. فَأَبَيْنَ أَن يَحْمِلْنَهَا وَأَشْفَقْنَ مِنْهَا وَحَمَلَهَا الْإِنسَانِ. But they declined. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us that the earth, the heavens, the seven heavens were offered amana. The earth was offered amana. The mountains were also offered amana. That is trust. He said, but they all declined. They declined. They refused to collect, to accept amana. They refused to accept what we call trust, amana. They fear the consequences of accepting amana. The consequences, the burden of carrying what we call amana, trust. He said, وَحَمَلَهَا الْإِنسَانِ. But mankind assumed it. Mankind decided to accept amana. They decided to carry the load. They feel they have the capacity to carry the load of amana. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala now continues. He said, إِنَّهُ كَانَ ظَلُومًا جَهُولًا. Indeed, he said, mankind, indeed man is what? Unjust to himself and ignorant. Meaning, accepting amana is that you don't know the consequences of the amana. As a result of your ignorance, you accepted amana, you accepted trust, but it is a big test from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And why am I quoting this verse? It is because the position of power, the position of leadership is a test from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts you in a certain position to head people, to control a community, maybe to head a community, or maybe a country, or a state, or maybe a community, wherever you find yourself, even as a Muslim, maybe as an Imam, you are heading the Ummah, the Muslim Ummah in your community. It is a test from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is a trust from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is a trust because Allah will ask you how you have done, how you performed. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us that amana is a very strong thing. And one of the things we must know is that what the position of power and leadership is amana from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And one thing we must know is that if you find yourself in a position of power, in a position of leadership, it is a test from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us in Surah Yunus, chapter 10, verse 14, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, ثُمَّ جَعَلْنَاكُمْ خَلَائِفَ فِي الْأَرْضِ مِنْ بَعْدِهِمْ لِنَنْظُرَ كَيْفَ تَعْمَلُونَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us in this noble verse of the Quran that ثُمَّ جَعَلْنَاكُمْ خَلَائِفَ فِي الْأَرْضِ مِنْ بَعْدِهِمْ. He said, then we made you successors, we made you leaders, we made you people who are what? Who are in charge in what? On the earth after them, meaning after those who have gone. Some people have been leaders before, some people have been khalifa, they've been assigned as successors before, But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, He now made you successors. He made you leaders. He put you in a position of leadership after them. Then He said, لِنَنْظُرَ كَيْفَ تَعْمَلُونَ. We want to see how you will do it. Meaning a position of power, if Allah puts you in a certain position, it is because Allah wants to see how you will do it. Today we are fond of saying, oh, the president is not doing well, oh, the governor is not doing well, and so on and so. We are used to that. Condemning other people, saying they are not doing. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you that position you are occupying at the moment, He said, لِنَنْظُرَ كَيْفَ تَعْمَلُونَ. We want to see how you will handle that position. We want to see how you will perform in that position that Allah has given to you. One thing you must understand is that you don't have to be the president of a nation before Allah asks you how you behaved while you were occupying certain position. Because every situation you find yourself, you are heading one thing or the other. You are either a leader, maybe in your house, in your community, even among your groups. So you can even on your WhatsApp group, you are a leader, because if they assign you that you are the administrator of the group, you tell us how to do and what not to do. Allah will say everything, every aspect of your life. If you are in any position, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, لِنَنْظُرَ كَيْفَ تَعْمَلُونَ. We want to see how you are going to do it. If you've been made the king or the king in your community or in your place where you come, your village, Allah said, لِنَنْظُرَ كَيْفَ تَعْمَلُونَ. Because some people have been king, they've been king there, they've been leaders there, but it is your turn. Allah wants to see how you are going to do it. So every position that you find yourself in, it is a position of test from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because Allah will ask you, how did you do? How did you head these people? How did you direct these people? How did you conduct the people? So you must understand that the position of leadership is not a position to enjoy. It is not a position for you to think, oh, I am living large. Wallahi, you are only living large on this earth if you know the burden of leadership in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Some of you will run away from leadership. If people know the burden of leadership, to become a president of this nation, some people will run away from it. They will never accept it. Even some of them, if Allah shows them that this is what you are going to face, people don't know. But the moment if you know the burden of leadership, wallahi, many people will run away from that position. If Allah begins to ask you, to question you about 200 million people, how did they live under you? Isn't that a burden? Because there are some people in your immediate family, maybe your cousins or so, that you don't even know how they are living. Not to talk of you being in a position where you have thousands of people, millions of people under your control, under your leadership. And Allah will ask you, how did you direct them? How did you lead them? It is very important for us to know that the position of leadership is a test from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And one of the things you must do as a leader is that you must lead with justice and fairness. You must be just. You must be fair. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us in Surah An-Nisa, chapter 4, verse 58. He said, إِنَّ اللَّهَ يَأْمُرُكُمْ أَن تُؤَدُّوا الْأَمَانَاتِ إِلَى أهلها وإذا حكمتم بين الناس أن تحكموا بالعدل إن الله نعم ما يعظكم به إن الله كان سميعا بصيرا. In this noble verse of the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us that Inna Allah ya'murukum an tu'addul amanati ila ahliha. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has commanded, indeed Allah has commanded you that you should what? You should return trust to their rightful owner. If you acquire something, or if somebody gives you something, that please help me keep it, help me take care of it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said you should return it back to those, you should return what they've given to you or what you've collected from them, you should return it back to them. That is what is good for you. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَإِذَا حَكَمْتُمْ بَيْنَ النَّاسِ. He said, if you want to judge among the people, maybe between two people, or people come to you with cases and so on, if you want to judge between them, he said, أَن تَحْكُمُوا بِالْعَدْلِ. You should judge with fairness. You should be just. Then he said, Inna Allah ni'ma ya'idukum bi. What a noble commandment from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, from your Lord. He said, Inna Allah kana sami'an basira. He said, certainly Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is all hearing, all seeing. So my brothers and sisters in deen, our khutbah for today is that what? Leadership position is a test from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And one of the things you must use to head or to lead people is what? Is justice and fairness. You must be just to people. But today, we find ourselves, we've read about instances where two communities are against themselves, maybe on a piece of land or maybe some hectares or acres of land, and then they take it to the leader or whoever is heading that entire community. And when he gets to his table, all he just do is, okay, I take ownership of it. You all should go. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will ask you. What you are taking ownership of is not even something you can take to the grave. So why are you carrying burden upon yourself? The truth is that even when you live, when you die, these people will assume they will take that thing back, but Allah will still ask you. Even though you didn't take it along, you left it behind. Maybe for many years you took ownership of that item or of that thing, of that property, and they could not take it from you. Maybe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala now take your life. The moment Allah and they get that property back, it will still not exonerate you from being asked, from being queried by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for taking ownership of what does not belong to you, or for oppressing people. So my brothers and sisters, indeed, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts you in a position of power, you should fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, lead with justice and fairness. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam told us in a hadith, he said, Kullukum ra'in wa kullukum mas'ulun an ra'iyati. He said, Kullukum ra'in. He said, all of you are shepherds. Wa kullukum mas'ulun an ra'iyati. And you all will be asked for your flocks, those under your control. Allah will ask you. So if Allah puts you in a certain position, Allah will ask you, those under you, how did you treat them? You are a father. How did you treat your children? How did you treat your wife as a husband? You are as a wife. How did you nurture your children? And how did you take care of your husband too? How did you take care of his properties and the things in the house that is in your own care as a woman? One of those things is the food. Do you just give out food the way you like to people without his consent? Allah will ask you. It is very, very important. So my brothers and sisters, indeed, the position of power is not a position of luxury. It is a position of test. It is a position that if you assume that position, you should continue to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to guide you. It is one of those positions that once you occupy, shaitan will never leave you alone. Shaitan can easily mislead people that are in position of power. And one of the ways shaitan will make you to begin to mislead you is to make you to see yourself, to feel you are above other people. You begin to commonize people, underrate them, disrespect them because you are in certain positions. So you must be very, very careful. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide us. So as believers, if you find yourself in a position of power, there are things that you must take into consideration, that you must possess, that you must have. One of those things, the first thing is that what? You must have taqwa, the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you are going to lead people, make sure that you have taqwa, you have the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Do not lead people without the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you lead people without the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you will end up destroying yourself. Even though you will destroy them, you will destroy yourself more. And that is why those who have led people in the past without the fear of Allah, you see the way Allah narrated their story and the way they are going to end. So one of the things you must have is taqwa. You might be a supervisor in your place of work. Fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala the way you supervise. Don't say because you are the supervisor, you make work difficult for a particular staff because you don't like the staff. I'll make him get tired so he can resign. Fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You are the CEO of your company. You want your staff to work overtime. You can appeal to them. Even if you don't have money, appeal to them in a nice way. Don't threaten them that if you're not working overtime, you are going to lose your job. And you're not going to pay them. Fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As a father, fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The way you treat your children. As a mother, fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Don't treat some children special from the others. Don't give some preferential treatment. You treat them very well, and the other ones, you treat them the way you like. Or you treat the male child more. You treat him specially, and you ignore the female children, forgetting that you are also a woman. So my brothers and sisters, indeed, the position of power is a test. Another thing you must possess as a leader is what? You must be just and fair. Be just and fair. Treat people with what? With fairness. Be just. Do not be good to people because they have something to offer you. As an imam, do not pay more attention to the members of the congregation that are wealthy, that are rich. You'll be good to every one of them. You give everybody the needed attention. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put you in that position for the rich and for the poor. Another thing you must possess as a leader is what? You must be compassionate and empathetic. You must be somebody who has what? Who has compassion in their heart. You must be somebody who is kind. Somebody who has pity for people. Do not stress them because you know they don't have any other option. They don't have another job. So you make things difficult for them. Your staff is not feeling fine. He could not do the work today. And you know, obviously, he's not feeling fine. He's in hospital. But because he didn't come for you deduct from his salary. But the days he was feeling fine, he didn't miss the job. He didn't miss a day. He came. But because he's not feeling fine today, you begin to deduct for the number of days. And he's still going to pay hospital bills, and you're not going to help him to pay. Sometimes you should be considerate. You should fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Another thing you must have as a leader is what? You must what? You must possess wisdom and knowledge. Knowledge is very important for you to lead. If you have knowledge, even if you don't have wealth, you can be a leader. But if you have wealth and you don't have knowledge, you will use money to buy the position, but you will end up being a puppet for some other people. Because people will use it to achieve certain, because they know you don't have the knowledge, you don't have the idea. So you must have knowledge, seek knowledge. Just as the Prophet told us in the hadith, said, "Talabul ilm faridatun ala kulli Muslim." Seeking for knowledge is compulsory on all Muslims. You should seek knowledge as a leader. Make sure you have knowledge to lead people. And another thing you must have is what? Wisdom. You can get wisdom from the Quran, from the verses of the Quran, from the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. You can get wisdom from there. You can also get wisdom by sitting with people who are more knowledgeable than you, who are more experienced than you, who are older than you, who have seen certain things, who have experienced certain things. This way you'll be able to build yourself and you will possess more wisdom. And that is why you see people in position of power, they have advisors. Because you need the wisdom of others to lead. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide us. Then there is one thing you must always remember. If you find yourself in a position of power, you can lose the position at any time. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us in Surah Al-Imran, He told the Prophet he said in that verse, He said, قُلِ اللَّهُمَّ مَالِكَ الْمُلْكِ تُؤْتِي الْمُلْكَ مَنْ تَشَاءُ وَتَنْزِعُ الْمُلْكَ مِمَّنْ تَشَاءُ وَتُعِزُّ مَنْ تَشَاءُ وَتُذِلُّ مَنْ تَشَاءُ بِيَدِكَ الْخَيْرُ إِنَّكَ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ قَدِيرٌ. In this noble verse of the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling Prophet, say to them, قُلِ اللَّهُمَّ مَالِكَ الْمُلْكِ. He says, oh Allah, owner of sovereignty, تُؤْتِي الْمُلْكَ مَنْ تَشَاءُ. You give sovereignty, you give power, you give position of leadership to whoever you want. تُؤْتِي الْمُلْكَ مَنْ تَشَاءُ. To whomever you will. وَتَنْزِعُ الْمُلْكَ مِمَّنْ تَشَاءُ. And you take power away from whomever you will or whom you will. And He said, مِمَّنْ تَشَاءُ وَتُعِزُّ مَنْ تَشَاءُ. And you uplift, you honor whoever you want. وَتُذِلُّ مَنْ تَشَاءُ. And you what? And you bring down whoever you want. بِيَدِكَ الْخَيْرُ. All goodness is in your hands, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. إِنَّكَ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ قَدِيرٌ. You have power over everything. You are competent over everything. So as a leader, if you find yourself in a position of power, do not forget this verse of the Quran. Always remember that this position you find yourself, some people were there before. And if Allah wants, He will take that power from you. And there's nothing you can do. So if you find yourself in a position of power, it's not because you know how to do it better than the others. It is because Allah has destined that you will assume that position. And that is why I said that nobody will mistakenly get to any position. Anybody you see in any position, it is because Allah has destined that the person will be there. It is not because the person is smarter. It is not because the person knows how to rig or rigs election or whatever. It is because Allah has destined that the person will be there. And that is why no matter what you do to stop the person, if Allah has destined that the person will be there, you cannot stop the person. And that is why the Prophet told us now, he said, رُفِعَتِ الْأَقْلَامِ وَجَفَّتِ الصُّحْفِ. The pen has been lifted and the pages are dry. So my brothers and sisters, indeed, let us fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in any position we find ourselves. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continue to guide us and make it easy for us. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to continue to guide our brothers and sisters in Palestine, to show His mercies upon them, to forgive those who have lost their lives and make this their suffering to be a source of blessing for them. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help us find a long-lasting solution to this crisis and make the war to come to an end. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to continue to protect the entire Muslim ummah. Wherever we are having crisis all over the world, where there is both natural and human disaster, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to console those who might have lost one thing or the other as a result of those disasters. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to continue to guide us in all our endeavors and continue to protect us and continue to increase us in Iman. My brothers and sisters, indeed, let us try as much as possible to make use of what we have learned today. عباد الله إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون فاذكروا الله العظيم الجليل يذكركم واشكروه على آلائه ونعمه يزدكم ولذكر الله أكبر والله يعلم ما تصنعون قوموا إلى الصلاة يرحمكم الله.